Hello, Steve, and thank you for being today with us. We are just at the beginning of our activity for the European project DICHE, Digital Innovation in Culture and Heritage Education in the light of 21st century learning. And I'd like to start with you, our reflection about the use of digital storytelling in education. And I'd like to start with the 4 Cs: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. How digital storytelling, in your opinion, can reveal and enhance these skills?
This question actually is quite difficult to answer concisely. There are lots of ways. I've been working in this for over 10 years now, and I've worked predominantly with 16 to 19-year-olds on courses, media courses and the like. I've also worked with community members of a range of ages, right the way through from sort of 12 years old up to sort of 90. But I've also worked with school kids, and I would say without a doubt, of the 4 Cs, they're all in there. They're all in there in the process of digital storytelling. Just to be concise, I would say script writing, I would say photography, drawing, painting, any kind of mark making, or even filming as part of the production process. There's planning involved, there's independent thinking, and there's editing too. At the very end of the process, there's even sharing stories, which I think is very, very important, because people often hear publicly their voices for the first time. So are the 4 Cs very much incorporated into the digital storytelling process? Absolutely.
Talking about the digital storytelling as process, which is, from your experience, the most crucial step of this methodology for a teacher?
I work to a 5-step process in digital storytelling. So we start with a briefing where everyone gets to understand what we're trying to achieve. Then we go on to the writing phase, where people create the story, in a sense, as a script or as a form from which to create words and a communication. And then there's the recording phase, where we get the pictures and we get the soundtracks and we look for music and so on. The editing phase, where the whole thing is combined and put together and made to length the way it should be. And then finally, the sharing phase, where people get to see the story and the whole thing works very well together. But the bit that I would not want to get rid of would without doubt be the writing phase, so which is, the story creation phase. Because without a story, you don't have a digital story. So it's crucially important that I think we put as much emphasis and effort into that part of the process, more so very much than anything else, I think.
Reflecting on digital storytelling as a tool for teachers, what have you learned from and about your students thanks to this methodology?
Well, in answer to your question about what I've learned from my students, what haven't I learned about my students over the years? It does rather depend on what groups we're referring to. But if I just take the 16 to 19-year-olds, I've learned that everybody comes to a learning experience with baggage. I've learned that we need, as teachers, to be very sensitively aware of our own learners' needs, and the fact that if they come to a class in a strange state of mind, there may well be a perfectly justifiable reason for it. More often than not, there is. And digital storytelling can actually do that. It really does break down kind of barriers between that kind of distance that can come between a professional member of staff and a student. Now, remember, I'm working with kids who are just out of school. And depending on what you're doing, it could be slightly different. But it's an incredibly informative process, and because there is a personal element to digital storytelling, what tends to happen is that we do learn things about people that we would never learn in any other way, and it allows us to kind of gain access, if you like, a glimpse behind the curtain of somebody else's life.
We can't talk about digital storytelling without remembering a story. Is there a story from one of your students that you can't forget? And why? Was it for the topics or the making process? I mean, from a social or an individual perspective, or for the digital component?
Oh yeah, there are many stories, too many to tell here. perhaps one day we could actually meet face to face and we can discuss a few of these stories together. Stories about stories. One of the things that I was fascinated about is that people often make a story, and the story behind the story is often more revealing than the story itself. But the one that I think that I'm going to share with you now is a story of a young lady who was on one of my media courses years ago, just a few years ago. And after the story circle session, as part of the writing phase, she really couldn't think of an idea to tell. And it took hours and hours and hours in a group of about 15 students. It took hours to try and persuade her that, hey, look, there is something in your life that I'm sure you can make a story about, something that's happened to you, something that you've loved, something that you've not loved, or whatever. And I tried every single tactic I could. And we worked, there was actually a team working on this too. And so we tried and tried with this girl, and it took 3 or 4 sessions. And every time, when it came to it, she said, no, I just don't have anything that I can share about my life. And then she stopped. And then she said, there was the time when my family were arrested and taken hostage by the Iraqi services during the first Gulf War. That's not a story, is it? Which changed the entire landscape, as you can probably imagine. So I think the reason why I share that is because never give in. There will be a story in there. And sometimes people will try very hard, and they get barriers too. There's often barriers. However exciting the activities are, until somebody's comfortable with an idea, you just have to persevere.